Welcome to Glen Burnie, Maryland, to a town where the year 1988 marks a 100-year history, and where this year's centennial celebration has sparked new interest in Glen Burnie's early years. The search for history began last fall, even before the centennial year had begun. Students from Glen Burnie High School embarked on an archaeological dig into what might be called Glen Burnie's prehistory. That is to say, the period before this area became a town. They dug near the foundation of this former ruin of the Curtis Creek furnace, an industry of this region dating back to 1759. This furnace produced charcoal pig iron until 1851. However, artifacts that we may find at the dig site do not show as much of Glen Burnie's history as do these old photographs, which were dug up from mostly long-term residents of Glen Burnie. This gentleman, William Wilkes Glen, was a member of what might be called the founding family of Glen Burnie, for the town was named after the family's estate called Glen Burnie. Actually, it was William Glen's brother, John Glen, and his son and nephew who set about subdividing the land and laying out the future town. Some of the first buildings of the town can be seen in the background here. In the foreground can be seen the tracks of the Baltimore-Annapolis Railroad and tiles manufactured by the Curtis Creek Mining, Furnace, and Manufacturing Company, the first industry in Glen Burnie. Built before the Civil War, the Brayshaw home was the only house in Glen Burnie before 1880. And here's what a train passing through Glen Burnie would have looked like in 1887, 1 year before the official founding of the town. That is, when the local post office became the Glen Burnie Post Office. Strumming on the left is Mr. Thomas Woodfall, who aided the growth of Glen Burnie as an architect and home contractor. And so people began to settle in Glen Burnie. More houses were built, like this one, the home of Albert Hamlin, a leader in the community. He and others started the Glen Burnie Improvement Association, which still exists today. They also started the annual Big Glen Burnie Carnival in 1908 in order to raise money for sidewalks and other local improvements. Here is a view of Glen Burnie around 1910 along Crane Highway. By this time, both the telephone and the automobile had arrived in Glen Burnie. This is a 1908 telephone company. Taken 11 years later is a photo of an early telephone repair truck. Although the automobile made its appearance, the refrigerator was yet to come, and so Hine Brothers Ice House was operating in full force. And in 1922, the Glen Burnie Ice Company also began serving a town that looked something like this. Of course, this early part of the century saw U.S. involvement in World War I. Saunders Range served as a local training camp. A military band of the time can be seen in the foreground of this photo, showing the crowd at the Big Glen Burnie Carnival. After the armistice and end of World War I, the country entered the decade of the Roaring Twenties. Although the small town of Glen Burnie didn't actually roar, it did chuckle a little at this fancy dress parade. There were no giants or super fresh supermarkets, but instead local grocery stores throughout the community. One might go here, to the Menshaw family store. There's Mr. Menshaw at the far left. If not Menshaw's, a Glen Burnie resident might go to Carter's store at the corner of Crane Highway and 2nd Avenue. Although on the outskirts of town, Lipin's Corner was nevertheless a very well-known stopping point for all sorts of necessities. Any number of these small family stores existed in Glen Burnie during the 1920s and 30s. The 1920s also saw another type of growth, and this occurred in local education. Here are the students on their way to school. And here they are on their way out. This is the second graduating class of Glen Burnie High School, the class of 1927. As the school grew, it became associated with more students, teachers, and principals. All this growth in Glen Burnie created the need for a volunteer fire company. And so the town got their first fire engine, their first fire chief, and their first firehouse, which, by the way, is now the YMCA building. However, in the 1940s, attention was drawn away from domestic affairs to the war in Europe and the Pacific. And when the World War II veterans came back home, they received a warm welcome in Glen Burnie. After the parade, the old Glen Theater at the corner of Crane Highway and Baltimore and Annapolis Boulevard was a fun place to go. Town Center 7 is, of course, the modern equivalent. The 1950s came to Glen Burnie just as they did to the rest of the country. Little leagues were established in the expanding community. Five and dime stores added to the old family store tradition. And the fire company got some spiffy new engines. Glen Burnie High School had one of its most beloved principals, Pop Whalen. And in 1959, Herondale Mall opened, the first enclosed mall on the East Coast. In the last couple decades, Glen Burnie has continued to expand until it's difficult to see exactly where the community begins and ends. Only the future can tell us what heights in vitality and growth the town of Glen Burnie has yet to attain. This documentary presentation was produced by Donavan Arizmendi, Aaron Garnett, and Kevin Roth. We extend our thanks to Mr. Mark Schatz for his help in providing information and pictures of Glen Burnie, and to Mr. David Higgins for his providing necessary audio-visual equipment.